And every morning I made a choice to get up and to live my best life. And how my intentionality was forming were with daily rituals that I knew I had to execute in order to change my life for the future.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I am beyond excited to be speaking with the great, long-time dear friend, Krista Sevajian. Krista, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's very great to have you. Krista, would you kindly introduce yourself to folks?
Yes, my name is Krista Layne Sevajian. I am the owner, now president. I've just been labeled president with my new switchover of True LLC, where we began our business in 2016. It was established during, I would say, a dark night of my soul. And it has evolved into a product-based business where the groundwork was started as a life coach. So in 2019, we became a full product-based business, and we teach spiritually awakened classes. But now we are 100% a product-based business, and we are called Live True. And that is my background.
Thank you for sharing that. You said something that I've heard you say before, but I'd love if you explain it a little bit further. It was born out of a dark night of my soul, or during a dark night of my soul. Can you kind of let us know what that means?
Yeah, I would actually love to let you know what it means. Because of that time of my life, I get to be who I am today. And I would say every year I spent alive before 2016, I was getting to know myself. And then we were summoned, I would say by spirit or of God or the eternal source of what I do pray to move to a town in Indiana called Indiana, Pennsylvania, from the Washington, D.C. area. I was 29. Oh, no, actually, I was 32. And when I moved here, I stepped into a full changeover in life. And I realized what I was really relying on to decide what my worth was and what I cared about. And it was all stripped away. And no one knew me. No one knew anything about me. And that really rocked my world. And so I went into what some would call a deep depression. And I did not seek any sort of medicine or doctor support or anything like that. I just slipped deeper and deeper into a darkness where I was falling asleep by 5 p.m. at night. My children were 4 and 6, and I barely knew them or knew why I was mothering them anymore. I am married, and my partner today was the partner then. And we were going through a full-on life transition, and I didn't understand who I was anymore. So my identity was pretty much stripped away. And what happened was I ended up connecting with spirit deeply. And there's a whole story about that, but that was what I would describe the dark night of my soul. It was a deep, deep depression in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And Chris, as we've had more than one conversation prior to this in our lifetime, you know that I speak a lot through the lens of intentionality, right? And I'd love to actually hear about the process you were just referring to, connecting with spirit, and maybe incorporating the idea of intentionality into that, if you might, at some point.
Sure. So my background is I went to the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I met Melanie Bukartek, actually, your wife, your amazing partner. And I walked through a lot of early learning days with friends and went through a lot of life transitions and became an elementary school teacher. My background is elementary ed. And then I went quickly and swiftly into a school administration position at age 29. And at age 29, I met new obstacles of what leadership can bring into one's life. One being that you no longer belong to a tribe because leaders are made differently. Leadership is one where sometimes you walk alone to walk to the light. And I learned that early. And I saw a new lens of what tribal mentality can be like. And I was part of the tribe, which were the teachers, like we're a whole different makeup of people, right? And so then I became the leader of my tribe. And one day I walked into a classroom and I saw a teacher on her cell phone, and I had to talk with her. And she wanted me to be her friend, but I couldn't be. I had to be a leader, and I had to say what's best for students. And it's my understanding that same teacher began a very clear rumor about me and the principal I was working with. And what happened was my whole life started to shift because I realized I allowed gossip and what people thought of me to be the lens from which I looked at myself through, because I was relying so heavily, almost like praying to people at night, like those were my idols. It was like I wanted everyone to see me in this amazing light. And when they didn't, my world crumbled around me. So what happened was basically I continued to live through one day after the next of continuing as a leader, thinking, I'm meant to do this, I'm meant to lead, but this is literally feeling like it's breaking me. So I might as well move, then I decided to put in for a move to Pennsylvania because my father was sick, but also I was happy to get out of the situation I was in, one that I didn't feel I earned. But at the same time, I was the common denominator. I was still the one walking in that role without intention. And what happened was I put in for this job that people said I would never get. It's in the sixth highest paying school district in Pennsylvania, and it's in Pennsylvania where they're known to have these killer pension plans for teachers, and they pay for your health care, game over. This was it. And whatever people said I couldn't do, I always let that drive me. So I did it. And I got the job. And I came here and it started all over again. And it got even more intense. It got so much more intense, in fact, that the teachers that I was working with here ended up being ones that I had to confront as well. So even though we were the sixth highest paying school district, there's a lot of change that needed to happen and a lot of other things that needed to happen. And being as a leader, we sometimes deal with having to make the really tough calls, the really big decisions, the ones that other people did not sign up to make, and also empower people to help drive those decisions. So what ended up happening was I moved to a new area. I confronted some old issues, and more things occurred where I felt like I was taken to my knees. And so I cried every single day that I moved here. It's from 2015 until 2017 in February. And at night I would go to sleep, and then I would wake up, start my day again, and at night get in the shower and cry because I didn't want anyone in my family to see me anymore. And one day I said to myself, and I was going to church every Sunday, mind you, but I had no idea who God was at this point. I was so lost. My people were my gods. It was clear. And one day I said, God, take my life, or maybe I will. And I was crying in the shower. It was February. And what I'm about to tell you is what I think people see in those near-death experiences. So this could be the place where your listeners turn it off or turn it on. And I am fully aware of that with the business I run. And I felt a holy shower wash over me. It was the one where I heard the voice of angels and God very clearly. And I was told to stand up and step up. It's time for me to live. And they have me. I think it's that born again moment that people try to talk about. And so that was the day my tears stopped. And every morning I made a choice to get up and to live my best life. And how my intentionality was forming were with daily rituals that I knew I had to execute in order to change my life for the future. Because I understood my consistency levels were very low. So I'd start something like a diet, it'd be gone in a week, I would start a routine, it would be gone in 3 days, because I really didn't understand anything beyond a New Year's resolution at that point in my life. And, those only last maybe 17 days at the best, right? We know that the sustainability of a New Year's resolution is I have always experienced it being very short and sweet, but then it would end miserably. But finally, what happened was, because I was touched so deeply in my soul to live, I thought my life is worth living, and it's worth living with intentionality. And I never missed a day. I would wake up and I knew Tony Robbins was my guy at the time. I knew if I didn't have 3 minutes, I didn't have a life. So I thought, well, I could start with 3 minutes every morning. I'm going to sit in silence until I learn to get my brain to stop talking so much and get at least a little bit still and meditate. I'm going to spend 3 minutes praying about my own protection first, so I can step out intentionally and declare the life doesn't take me over, I take it. And that's how my intentional living began, Joe. Like, that's exactly how it began. It began very messy, but it got formed into a very succinct process over time.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think, I wonder if it has to start messy, right? Or if maybe, the way you describe it, it sounds like it certainly was messy, but it's seemingly far, far less messy now. And how do you stay connected with that idea? How do you stay connected? Is it simply the ritual of your 3 minutes daily, or has that shifted into something? What's your reminder? Do you have a physical reminder? Like, because we all get, low, we all have off periods, we get sick, heck, right? That could be enough to sometimes knock us off of our, our true north from time to time. So what do you do what is it that reminds you of your incentives or your drive?
Great question, because the first thing you said is, does it have to stay messy? And in my messaging, the answer is no, it doesn't ever have to be messy. It's just Krista decided in this life, I had to experience the mess, because the thing of it is it's my calling. You said your true north, or like your North Star. And the day whenever I was saved, like, I wasn't saved in a church. Church was my hell, right? But Jesus Christ you'll see this in a minute, is my role model, like my absolute model. So I turn every sort of belief system on its head, and you'll see that in a little bit. I'm sure your questions will lead to I quit my job. But one of the things that ended up happening was my only reminder was my North Star. I was promised that day. I was promised in my soul that I came here to live a life that was different from any other, to bring people to the light. So I decided to have a system of core values to follow my whole life by. And one of them is I bring the light. And if I'm raising anybody in this world, which I'm raising 2 young men, we're crusaders of the light. But my job is beyond being a mother. That's only 2 people to impact. I have a whole world to impact. And I felt like when I was saved that day, I had a big calling to see a bigger than me and to get outside of myself. So some of the things that remind me of that is I had some very early days, and I know this could be a typical thing for an intentional podcast to talk about, or for people to talk about. Vision boarding and visualization was huge for me. And words matter. So I hear words and they remind me of things. So I would always use the most high frequency words I could to describe my life. Some call it neurolinguistics. I just call it, positive talk. I always gave myself a chance to start every single day with that positive talk. And if I heard that something was happening in my head that didn't agree with the process I was agreeing to with spirit, what I did, Joe, I know this is nuts. I had a bracelet on my wrist, much like this beaded one that I don't think your viewers can see. But every time I would start a negative dialogue in my head, I would switch it to my other arm. And it was this thing that I think a life coach online actually taught me. But I had to give myself a physical reminder beyond hurting me, because I used to hurt myself. I used to give myself a pinch when I was biting my nails too much, or hurt myself in some way to destroy any progress I gave to me. And this time I thought, let's be gentle. Just switch your wrist and make it so one day you don't have to switch it anymore. And I tell you what, I don't even need them anymore. I won't even give myself an option to do anything but live my best life. And it was just day after day. And you can see we're in 2022 now. So over time, it did take time. But what is 5 years when you're living a whole life? Like, what is 5 years? 5 years is a really short blink of your eye, but it feels very long when you're living it and you're living in health. So those are some things that I used as a reminder, Joe.
That's great. And actually, your previous influence of Tony Robbins talks about changing your physiology. So that would absolutely address what you were talking about with previously pinching yourself. That is a physical response, but kinder to yourself. I love the idea of just switching your wardrobe, essentially, right? Giving you that moment to pause and think and move a little bit more. This is great. I have so many questions I want to go to. I'm trying to keep my thoughts organized here. So, Krista, when you've talked about this a lot, but I'm wondering if it's so when you're living with intention, what does that look like for you? Maybe even on a granular level, day to day. What does it look like for you to live with intention?
Right. I have a clear schedule, so I'll go through it. I think success leaves clues. So I watched mighty successful people, and this is how I watch them. Just as you said, Tony Robbins suggests that emotion changes with motion. And I would get on a treadmill at the time when it was really, darker weather outside that people were always complaining about. I chose not to complain about God's elements because I couldn't control them. So I got on a treadmill and I kept going. And I would put on early days, my whole life has changed, but early days, I would put on people like Joyce Meyer, because in that time of my life, her messages matched my reality. And I would keep listening, and I would become the learner and the receiver versus the one that knows it all. In my old life, I knew everything. Just, ask anyone that hung out with me. I knew everything about everything, whether it was true or false. And then I became this completely insatiable. You could never fill my hunger with enough learning. So I put her on in the early days, and she'd be backed up by Tony Robbins. And then that would be over. And then I would put on Gary Zukov, The Seat of the Soul. Then that would end, and I would put on The Untethered Soul. And then that would end, and I would listen to something like The Alchemist. But The Alchemist had so many internal truths to such a fictional story that I don't believe is fictional at all. And there were these moments in time where I just considered feeding my vessel with everything that I needed to get to the point that I'm in today. And then there was a day when I turned off all of the gurus. And I said, Krista, it's time to take the lead and be your own guru. Because I think the whole goal, especially in the world I live in, if anyone doesn't realize the world I live in with Live True, it's a metaphysical company. We sell crystals. People buy psychic advice all the time through crystal owners. And I chose to take the opposite approach. I said, no, my number 2 core value in this business is personal empowerment. If you have to buy a psychic reader to read your fortune for the future, there's zero empowerment in that product. So how do I create my life so I stop outsourcing my empowerment and I become my own guru and I learn me? Because I feel like, and you probably talk about this all the time, Joe, the person you spend the most time with is you. And if we aren't investing our most time in ourselves, how in the world do we create a relationship with thyself? So I literally exposed me in a town like this. I'm in a very small town. Mothers, I'm sure this happens everywhere. Mothers put everything they make, do, and be with their kids online on Facebook all the time. And I think that's, it stunts my mojo. So I don't consume that content online. My algorithm will show that I produce more than consume. And I very rarely see people's lives anymore because I don't look. But the one thing that I knew was I didn't identify with just being a mother. I identified with being, a fire starter, a change agent, a leader. A mother's in there, like a family person is in there, but it's not the only thing I do. And so all of these things came back to me. And because I gave myself permission to learn me and step away from just being the mom that takes everyone over to the basketball game and brings all of the friends over, which that's all important to a child's development. But if we aren't personally developing ourselves, we never find who we are anyway. So that is where I thought the game-changing moment is when I committed to me. I committed to me first. My first role in life is me before any other.
That's amazing.
Did I even answer the question?
You did, not in the way that I thought you might, but you absolutely answered it. Well,
What was the question again?
Well, I asked what it looked like for you to live with intention Right. But that absolutely gets at it because you connect with yourself. You turn down the amount of input that you were consuming and started producing your own life. Right. You stopped, gathering in information and just sitting with it, and you started enacting, and you listened to yourself more so than the third party, is what I'm hearing. Am I getting it?
Yeah. Can I just start the sentence again so the editor can begin and then they can add in those quotes later?
Absolutely. Go for it.
So what it looks like is literally my day in and day out looks very similar up until the day I quit my job. Because what I knew was I was running a lot of things at one time. I was running a full-time job. I was a mother, and I was also creating my business. And one of the things that I would do is first thing before anything else, before I started anything else, I would go to what I call my altar. And I created a space in my room where I can intentionally walk over, and I always pray a prayer of protection around myself and everyone that I will eventually come in contact with the day. But I always begin in a very selfish way. I first cover myself with my bubble of protection and light, and I draw light and love into my soul, and I send light and love out to the world every single day without fail. I call in my angels, and I do talk to Jesus Christ. You can talk to anybody you want. Those are the ones I resonate with, so I talk to them. And then I put them around my children, the ones that really are very much growing and becoming who they need to be in this world, but they don't necessarily have the full amount of life yet to go out and do it on their own. So I always pray for like these innocent parties first, right? And then I put a bubble of light around very specific people after that. These people that are very close to my life, my partner, people that I'm loving and close with, and just very specific people without mentioning names, because I never want for anyone to feel like they're left out. Because here's the other part. Then I pray for the world I go and I'm in. Because at the time I was heading to a school, and there were so many different realities happening at that time in my life, and things I couldn't control and things I very much had intentional living around. And if I just thought of things differently in my responses, in my actions, and what my priorities are, actually priority, and then what follows, that I knew the whole day would go differently. And so I would pray for wisdom around what to start with. And I always knew what to start with. I'd get in and I would always start with the one thing. And I would always begin my day, especially on days that were difficult and challenging in schools. If anyone who listens to this is a school employee, there are some really dark days in school systems, very dark days, especially as a leader, you see everything. So I would begin by saying, show me where to start and show me who to respond to first. And a lot of days I would start with just a thank you note to someone who may be feeling unseen or unheard, or someone that I don't remember speaking to in a while. And I would always start there. And inevitably, Ayn Rand calls it the virtue of selfishness. It just fed my own soul. Like it gave me a good positive start to start the day. But at the same time, I was paying it forward in another way. But in the end, it always helps the person doing it too. So those are some of the things I would begin with. And then here's the other thing. After I would start at my altar, I'd pray that protection prayer. I would go into about 3 minutes of meditation, and I would start like this. I would picture a blank movie screen in I call it my third eye, but it's the center of your forehead. It's the area where all of your thoughts are formed and where it seems like overactive thinking can become, a lifestyle. And I would blank it out. I would clear it, and I would put a big bright light into it. I would imagine that instead of all of the chatter, like, wonder how she liked how I talked to her yesterday. Or I wonder if my breath stunk whenever I spoke to him. I wonder if he's going to accept me the same way today as he did yesterday. It was always men too, because in my role, female leaders always look to get male approval. At least I felt that. And that's something I worked through. But it was always like that. And instead of thinking of all that stuff, I just pictured nothing the best I could. And even picturing a black movie screen is still something, but at least it wasn't all the rest of it. And then finally, here's the interesting thing. I pulled myself an oracle for the day. I just said, Spirit, lead me to what this would be. And I had a positive stack of like cards, kind of like your intentional cards show, like coaching cards, that type of thing. And I would pull one and I would read it. And I would say, all right, this is my MO today. I'm going for it. And it would always have like a positive intention. Like, when you shine your light can be found in others, something like that. I just kind of made it up, but
Sure.
that is how my day went. And I started it all within the first hour of my morning. And that set my tone for the rest of my day.
Yeah. You have such deep answers. There's so much to chew on here, Krista. That's why I'm just sitting with it. It's so good. It's so good. I'm looking forward to listening back to this, frankly. Here's what I'm curious about here is you talked about, what it looked like when you were in the school space as well. And you gave some great perspectives and how you intentionally led your life that way. At a certain point, that was no longer serving you. Would you be willing to share about that transition?
Yeah, I'm sure some of my customers are teachers that I was supervising. Some of my customers are parents. And when I share this truth, it's my truth. And you can take it or leave it, but I had to learn to get this way to be as successful as I am. So about 2 years ago, and we would call this the national, like the world pandemic. And I've learned in my business, I don't use certain words because I always want my Instagram accounts to be found. I never want to take a political stance on anything. I'll take the stance of light and I'll take the stance of hope and opportunity, but the politics can be left with the politicians. That's not where I'm going with my business. So when the world changed, I think forever in 2020, so did my life. We all went home. We all went inside. My business was partially online, but I was serving clients in person with coaching classes, with classes about spirituality, meditation. I was visiting about 6 people at a time or one-to-one settings. And Spirit led me to reach so many more because I couldn't reach them in my home. I couldn't reach them in person. And one day I sat here in that silence because we were somewhat watching classrooms from a distance because we were all on Zoom, all figuring that out. And I wasn't walking into classrooms. I wasn't showing up into a building. I wasn't doing the normal day-to-day paperwork I would normally do. We were all trying to figure this out. And I was the school principal of a 4th and 5th grade school here in Indiana, PA. And I have, I think, the best group to ever work with. I had the most empowering teaching staff. I was called in to turn around a school because they had dealt with some different leadership issues. And I had people who really loved to work. I had any school you go to, you're going to have the best students because they're so naturally themselves. And so I had the best of everything, except for, I think, leaders that are amazing and great are made differently. And I wasn't leading the whole thing, but I was learning how to lead. So one of the things I felt was, okay, how do I empower my people from a distance to feel appreciated, that they got this, even though they weren't trained to do this like this, that, we can love people even when we're not in front of them physically, but we can still feel each other's energy. And I think it was quite simple. I believed in them. And I always approached them in a way that I knew they were going to kill it. And they were the best employees that I would ever work with. And it turns out they ended up producing that way. So we were the school of excellence. And in my opinion, everybody wanted to come to our school. I would want to come to my school. I worked for really crappy principals. I was the principal I'd want to work with. Because the other side was I was willing to listen and learn. If I was doing something incorrectly, or I would never think anything's really incorrect. Once you learn, you do better. I would listen. I would say, is this working, you guys? And they go, Krista, it's not real. It doesn't work like that. And I go, oh my gosh, I forgot it. I haven't been in a classroom in a while. Let's look at this differently. Let's look at the information and see how we can drive this differently. So we were empowering each other like that.
Krista, so far, this is sounding like a story as to why you love your job and are still there. Like you're describing a really wonderful work culture and work environment, it sounds like so far.
Yes. So it's important for you to know that because I like to create the places I want to be. The difference is not every leader understands that, especially in schools. We weren't trained like Fortune 500 leaders, right? We were trained to be teachers. And if you're lucky, you're going to figure out leadership without guilting and shaming people and telling them, why are you calling off again? You suck. or not talking to you the next day because you did something wrong. Those were the leaders I had. I had the leaders that stopped talking to people because they misbehaved like kids. Like you almost become like a parent for some odd reason as a principal to even the employees. And that's awkward and weird to me. And so I thought, no, I'm treating these employees like they're working at the Four Seasons and we're running the best company in the world. Like that's what I'm treating my employees like, because Four Seasons is known for human resources and positive employee engagement. They're known for their culture. I have a close friend that works in a high level at Four Seasons. So one of the things that I did is I want to run my school like the Four Seasons. The difference was people didn't run me that way. I always felt like Michael Jordan, who wanted a Scottie Pippen, and I didn't know who my Scottie Pippen was to play with. I wanted to play ball in a winning team that won championships one after another, and we never stopped. And so I would request consistently after that year, I would go, hey guys, we need leadership training. Hey guys, can we get leadership training? Hey guys, our employees are really special people. We need leadership training. And year after year after year, or I would say month after month after month, I was unheard and I wasn't listened to. But yet my people loved coming to work. I had the lowest rate of people taking off. I had the highest rate of student attendance and lowest discipline referrals. People loved coming to school. No one would listen. And then what happened was I was now at home and my employees were starting to get to the point where they were really kind of handling it, but it's still difficult. But we all went back to school. And what happened was, this is a little bit drawn out, Joe, so I hope you can edit some of it out. Here's the part that makes sense. Let me start here one more time. When we were all shut in, I started putting all of my work online. And that's where I started posting my products. I was able to work from home. I was able to see that I had another side to work with so I could reach more people. But simultaneously, our leadership team was finding a way to get everyone back in school. So we were one of the only schools that was going back. They were going back. 2022 hit. And it felt like a whole political battle started to break out in our school system. And there were all these converging beliefs about masks and no masks and who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated. Do we ask for vaccine cards? And then it was said to me, if you have a kid that doesn't come to school with a mask on, there is discipline you need to put in place. And I said, wait a minute. We were just saying a week ago that this is how we handle this situation. And now I have a student with an IEP that's saying he's not coming to school with a mask on. And you're saying that if I don't discipline him, it could fall back on me and I could be taken to court about this. And that was the day my whole world changed. So whenever I realized, no matter what your political view is, when we're putting our students in the center of this issue and creating them as the leveraging point of our true decision. So if I would discipline this kid, it would change his life forever. If I would discipline that student for not doing what he was told to do, when he put in the proper notice and all these things to do it, then he would have a mark on him for life, something that could not be reversed because he was standing up to take a stance in fourth grade. He was using his voice. And now I'm disciplining him and making him go home as a suspension for not wearing a mask. So I went to the board meeting and my husband spoke up on my behalf, something no one ever does, and said, what are you doing with your employees if they do not confront students and put them in a disciplinary action? Like, what is your answer to this? And this is a very, drawn out story just to say it was still going to be a court case. And that's when I decided that no matter what, I wasn't going to hold back. And basically, Joe, this is long, so I don't want to put all that in. But I think
don't
what
worry
it's
about it. No, this is good. Keep going.
Okay. I think what it's coming down to is I felt like I was supposed to leave. I felt like I wasn't being heard. I wasn't part of a good old boys system that was being developed. I didn't have the same. In fact, I'm not even affiliated with any side. I am one of those people that can't even vote in the primaries because I'm not, I'm in that world of I'm not here to commit to you or you. I'm here for the people. So if this makes sense for the people, I'm voting for it. If it doesn't make sense for the people, I'm not voting for it. And I have a very clear, I have a husband that's very clear on his stances. I have people in my life that are very clear. I would say that great for you. I have my perceptions too, and I have my intentional stance on this too. There was a very clear political gain going on in my school system, and one that I couldn't get my heart around and I couldn't feel empowered around. And so I started to prepare the employees I worked with. I said, I'm getting ready to transition out. I didn't even, Joe, I'll tell you what, I didn't even run my numbers to the point to know I could live off of my earnings. And my whole paycheck was paying for our life at the time. Like it was all paying for our life. And I didn't even know if I could continue. But what I thought was I was smart. I bought the house where I have a very low mortgage because I know how to flip homes. So we bought it at a very low rate, very low. It's not even a mortgage. I rent to my company. So I don't even have a mortgage. All my cars were paid off. I have zero credit card debt. I learned early I didn't want debt. And my payments to life were very minimal. So I could literally go to Starbucks and work and pay for my life. And I knew that. And so I thought, I have nothing to lose except for my heart if I stay in this. And so the day that I quit my job, see, I'm like talking about this for the first time, but I've never really shared this full story like this.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah. But like the day that I quit my job, I knew that no longer people were listening to me at a higher level. I knew that people at this hierarchy, like a superintendent, wasn't listening to me. In fact, he was sending his people, and they didn't have any right to even have supervision models over me. They were the same line as me. So they couldn't even supervise me, but they're telling me you need to suck it up and do the job. That's what the superintendent said. I said, yeah, but we have kids. I was in charge of a lot of different things, and we had kids failing and we had kids not doing well. And there weren't answers for that, but we were going to stand on these other things that we needed to stand on. So I would just say that pandemic changed me, and it gave me a voice, and it gave me the reason why I'm here and how to build that out.
This is, I think
we can start over with that too, Joe. Like we can make it shorter because now I know what I was going to say.
Oh, you don't even need to. No. There's such good nuggets in there. I don't want to redo any of that.
I just hope it makes sense because I did ramble because I realized there's so many facets, and I've learned to release a lot of it because it hurt a lot.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I hope that it's helpful to have this space to be able to do such a thing. And with the power of podcast producing, it's going to come out in some like cool little succinct nugget, right? With all your points intact is the goal here anyway. So what you talked about, well, you didn't talk about this, but this phenomenon that I'm hearing happening is, just the fact that all these external circumstances are happening around you that we don't have control over, this global pandemic, the leadership culture of, the folks above you, decision makers above you, that we don't necessarily have control of. But what you have identified is your ability to respond, right? How are you willing to respond? And when you are in charge of a space, you do have maybe more influence on the outcome that will affect many other people. But inevitably, in any situation, you always have the ability to decide how you choose to respond. And it sounds like this was, you had enough of the traditional reasons perhaps to just stick it out, right? Just financially, just stick with it. You're in this highly regarded school system in a highly regarded position that you should just stick with it, grin and bear it. It could always be worse. I'm sure you heard those types of things as well. But you chose that this didn't make sense for you. There was too much of a sacrifice, too much of a cost. And while maybe not a monetary cost, too much of a cost to you personally, if you were to just exist and continue to be in that situation. So it sounds like you got very intentional in choosing how to respond. And it sounds like it served you very, very well to this point.
I don't know if other listeners feel this way or not, or if you have other people to talk about this. I never wanted anyone to own my life ever, or anything, whether it's money, another person, a job, because I felt like there's no life in that life. And so early in my 20s, I decided I didn't want to live with debt because it was owning my life. My husband lost his job in my 20s, and I had this whole facade to hold up. And I thought, how am I going to pay for this house in Southern Maryland that's like, $2,700 every month going out? And now I'm making a $70,000 salary that cannot pay for that. That was when I was an assistant principal in Maryland. And I thought, how am I going to hold up this lifestyle? And I thought, holy cow, too much owns me right now. The money owns me, the house owns me, and the perception of others own me. So I was already kind of wired that I learned that life lesson really early, and I never wanted to live like that again. So with intentional planning, I'll throw out a name that maybe some people know about, but early on, I used Dave Ramsey's advice. I don't agree with all of it now. I think there's absolutely good debt to have. In fact, that runs the whole other side of our business. But there's this other side too, where because I had that early learning, we can't negate the early days of our existence, because those are the things that build us. That's the reason our house stands the way it does. And so when we got to this point and I was able to look at all of my teachers in the face, because I had a lot of employees come to school where they were like, I can't believe, people are making us do this or making you do that. And I would just say back to them very respectfully and lovingly, then change your life so you don't have to let that happen. Either become the leader or create a life where you don't have to pay for your house or you don't have to have the job to pay for your house. And that almost sounds like a foreign language someone doesn't know if you've never thought of it. In fact, I've met many people now that never knew what it's like not to have a car payment. And I just knew what it was like early, so I wanted to keep it. And they knew what it was like to be able to maintain car payments their whole life. I just never wanted to. So it's just a matter of mindset. And I just wanted to share this one last thing with that, Joe. This is intentional too. Questioning your own mindset. That mind traps you in a cage you don't even realize you're in half the time. How fast can you finish your mile? It's a mindset. How fast can you earn your 400K a year? That's a mindset. Or how soon can you earn it? That's a mindset. If and when you can ever quit your job is absolutely 100% a mindset. It all is. Every piece of it. Because it always starts with the way you think about it. Because it's another thing to then take action.
That's a great share. That's a great nugget. So, you've raised kind of another issue, unfortunately, is all these wonderful sound bites that you're creating. And now my podcast editor is going to have to really have a hard time, figuring out which one to include here with the episode. So thanks a lot. Krista, how about folks who maybe don't have the strongest muscle in building a helpful or intentional mindset? What would you encourage them to do? You've obviously had a lot of practice and you've likely built confidence in your approach. What would you suggest to people who maybe love what they're hearing right now? Man, that sounds great. Oh man, I'm sure glad it worked out for her, but it couldn't possibly be me. What about folks that are kind of living in that zone right now? What would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, number one, if you're already naturally saying it couldn't be you, there's your issue. Start there. Because you're selling yourself short. That sounds like a worthiness issue. So that's the number one piece I would start with. The second piece, and this will always be this, I live with people that have difficulty with this. They live in my home. I'm raising one of them. And the number one piece is, it always comes down to, no one can be your best mentor but you. Again, it will always start with you. And this is the odd part. This is the weirdest part, because this is the place, if you're listening and you're afraid to be alone, that's your first and number one priority then. That means you need and are literally starving for a date with yourself if you're afraid to be alone with you. That's where I had the biggest issue. I used to think it couldn't be me. I used to think I could never nail any of this. But I was also the woman that was scared to death to spend time with myself. Deep, deep time with myself, without changing the subject, without calling a friend to come in for a date, without planning a big hurrah or to-do or party. I planned more parties than I did my own life back then. So the number one thing that I would recommend to anybody, and again, I would never claim to be anybody's guru. In fact, I should never be somebody's guru, is yourself. Start with you. You know you best. You know if you can commit the 3 minutes in the morning to meditation, or maybe it is you have to go out for the run, or you have to go out for the calm walk, or you have to go out and do something different for you. Did you know driving can even be that moment? Turn the radio off. Driving can be that moment. The shower can be that moment. Whatever is your moment, that's up to you to find. That's the hardest part. The hardest part is no one's going to be able to answer this for you, but you. So the number one thing you can do is date yourself. Date yourself and treat yourself like the best lover you've ever had. Give yourself the most time. Give yourself the best food. Give yourself an extra bath that day. Give yourself a beautiful shirt to put on your back if you can. Give yourself a walk around the block whenever you really just want to beat yourself up. Treat yourself like the best lover you've ever had in your life. That's where you start.
That's excellent. I think that's a great challenge. Great challenge. Even to the folks who aren't so low on themselves right now, even to the folks who are feeling helpless, right? I think that's you've already integrated it into your daily practice.
Can
right?
I share one more thing, Joe? Like for the
at least one
edit?
more, please. Yeah, please do.
Okay. So like for the editor right after this. One of the things that I had to learn to do early in order to understand how to help myself and say I can do it is I had to turn off the external noise. Because oftentimes the things that we're really inspired by and passionate about, no one else can live that dream for you. No one else, sometimes it's hard to even find one person that understands why you have it. And in my case, I was being called a witch and a witchcraft lover and a Satan worshiper. And all I was doing was selling crystals, and loving them. This was before I ever sold them. I loved them. I'm like, I really like crystals. And Melanie knows me early. I mean, I thrived on pointing out everyone that didn't follow Christ and the Bible. But then I was starting to be called like a witch and a Satan worshiper and all these things. And I had to stop listening to them because it just wasn't true. I knew what I followed. I knew what I was praying toward, and I knew what I was creating in this world. And mine is a very extreme example. And of course, Krista, that's me, has to go through all these extreme examples to learn life so that I can help other people, I think, as a model to come out of the valley and onto the peak and then back to the valley. But your passion is literally showing you a light to yourself. And sometimes we forego looking at that. And that passion is exactly where this intentional living stems from. This is it. It's usually the thing that takes you to your knees too. That's the other side of it. Your passion oftentimes is found whenever you're on your knees, or you feel like there's nowhere to go, or you feel like there's no one to talk to, or it's the thing that won't leave your heart. It's that thing. And so that's where I would say, spend time with you and away from all these other people that can draw you away from that.
Hey, again, that's great. That's some really good insight, right? And maybe not even advice, because I have a feeling that you would shy away from the idea of giving someone advice. So I won't call it that. But it's a wonderful challenge for people to consider, I think. Krista, who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
Yeah. So when you sent our notes ahead of time, so we could kind of plan for this, I was really hoping that my story would lend itself to this question, because I lived in a day where I would sit in church and listen to people praying. And I'm like, why? How do they pray like that? Like, I don't understand. How does that happen? I'm not like that. Does God even like love me? Is this a thing? And I would just say, I never knew God until that day in the shower, if that makes the cut. I never knew God until that day in the shower when I was so low and I was spoken to. And then I thought about this question, and here's how it's always been. I've never known a human I look up to. And I think that's important to realize as a leader, that there might be people that, leave success nuggets, like trails, on the ground that we can follow. And I do have one of those. That person, it's a human. So this person cannot guide me through life. This person cannot show me something that literally you died for it. This is Michael Jordan. This is the best basketball player. Of course, that's only an opinion. It's the guy that I could watch and watch and watch play basketball. But when I hear him talk about success, leadership, and his hunger to overcome adversity, that's leadership. Leaders are made different. Leaders have so much action in their every step that the things people say and do about them doesn't even matter, because all of the examples that are out there are so in your face that there's nothing left to say. It's like, well, my life is so successful that I don't even, like, it's almost like a whisper. It's so low, I can't even hear what people are saying anymore because I'm so focused on what I'm building. But that's just a person. The only mentor that I've ever had that I felt like never went away is Jesus. And it wasn't because I felt like he could take me to heaven, although I realize exactly why I feel like heaven's around when Jesus is with me. This is for something different. The stories that were written, and I pray that they were as accurate as they seem, because when I hear them in prayer, it feels very accurate. But I also realize it's one person's account of the situation in the Bible. It is that he went to places no one else would go. He did it because the calling was so great. He was willing to live until the very end, and it literally took his life because he believed so deeply in the calling of what was driving him and what was breathing life into him and what was telling him to keep going. I still think there's other pieces of a story that were not narrated and told to us, and I get that in my own way. But I also know there's a fierceness about him people didn't like in that time. And it actually scared them because he was so rebellious. And guess what? Those are the game changers. Those are the ones that turn this world around from the darkness to the light. It's those people. It's those people that rumble the space because you're different. It's those people that hush mouths because you're doing the unthinkable. It is those people that walk into a town when everyone's talking crap and you do it anyway because you know it's going to make the change that has to happen. You're the fierce one that went in there. That's the model I look to.
Speaking of game changers, Krista, what do you imagine some people admire about you?
Well, I think when I die, I always think about this question as death, because like I think of life in life I lived where I cared about what people thought and admired about me. And then I had to shed all that. So I think when I die, people will find hope to live on in their own truth and to do it fiercely. And I don't even think my name will be remembered after some time. And I think that's the mark of like true greatness, is when no one talks about you. They just live it, right? Like they live it and they don't need to say your name. They don't need to say Krista did it. Krista's like, you know, who I'm praying to and want to be like that's not the game. The game is that you do it so subtly, but so obviously. Like it's this crazy way of looking at life where I turned the world on its head in this little town by quitting my job. No one quits this job, right? Nobody quits the full-on pension plan and the highest teacher salaries and principal salaries. Like I got paid more than the principals in the surrounding districts for sure, and more than I got paid in DC. And my paycheck was $95,000 for your viewers. Like that was a big deal for us in education here. And then what I learned was that rocked. That's the way God had to use my story, because that's what we held on to so tightly, is that security. And I was willing to walk away. And one person after the next, even people that I thought didn't like me, but I didn't care, because I have gotten to. And I think what they watched is a person that really lived with. Can you hear me, Joe? Can't hear you.
Krista, you can't hear me because I was on mute. But what I was trying to say while I was on mute is that I couldn't hear you for about the last 10 seconds. And if if you could kindly start that thought over again. Of course, you couldn't hear me. I was on mute. But anyway, you froze. So could you restart that thought?
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
So I think what happened was with me quitting such a secure job, with quitting that security and living every single day with passion, because there wasn't a day I went into school and questioned my reason for being there. I loved it. I loved everything about what I did. And I felt like it was serving for such a great purpose. I loved my job. I just didn't like the way that I was being treated. And I didn't like the way the people were being treated. And I didn't like the way things were being handled, to be very real with you. And these are beautiful people running this system. I don't even think it's their fault until they learn better, but it's time to do better once you learn better. But that quitting sent a shock around the town. And it was something people couldn't stop talking about. And where I heard the most of that was, you taught me what I can do by just doing it. Like, you followed through and you did it. And that was the piece where I felt like that was my calling, to follow through and I'm sorry, I'm rambling, Joe. Like, that was the piece that was the game changers, that I actually followed through and did it. But like, I also knew, I didn't tell this story, Joe, but there was a day that I went for a run and I heard a voice. Like, I think it's just like how the Bible talks about it. That's why I don't think the prophets are the only ones that know things, and the apostle or the disciples. I know things. And I was spoken to on my run, and it was Jesus. And Jesus said, you're going to quit your job now. And I have you. But you got to listen to me. You got to quit your job and you got to listen to me every step. That's how this goes. I didn't know I was going to be able to pay for my life. Although my numbers showed it, I was overspending in inventory. So I didn't have anything down pat, right? Like, I didn't have anything to the point where I'm like, I could do this. I just knew I was supposed to do this. I was relying on all this, income coming in to do whatever I wanted. I wasn't paying attention the way I was supposed to. And I heard it said to me, you are to do this. It's time now. And what happened to me is I was on this downhill path where everyone can see me. In fact, everyone drives in and out of town on this road. And I broke down and I cried so deeply, so hard, because I knew this change was coming. And that was the day that I decided to quit. I heard it and I responded. I don't know why I said that. I had to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it sounds like this had to happen in such a public place, given the way your story's been unfolding, right? You had to show people another way.
So when I die, this was the point. Like, when I die,
yeah,
that's what people would admire about me. So let me start over for the editor. I always picture how people would admire me when I'm dead. And that is that they didn't even realize that I was necessarily the person that caused them to make the move they needed to. I was just simply a signal. Like, I just wanted it to be just like a signal. And that's how that goes. So like, they can make the decisions they've always wanted to make in life.
Yeah, you have a lot of really rich thoughts here, Krista. And to that end, is there a way that people can hear more of your thoughts or follow more of these insights? How do people find you?
So right now we have our greatest presence on Instagram, and that's where a lot of our business comes from. So we're on Instagram at Live True Healing. And that place is the space where we have 2 lives per week. And so we consider our lives being a place where, yes, you can obtain crystals and cleansing like sage and candles, but more so just nuggets of insight. So oftentimes we'll just go into kind of these types of talks, Joe, where someone will put in the comments something going on, and then it will literally trigger an idea that's coming forth, and we'll talk about that. So those are the spaces where we meet in community and really just dive into life together. And then another space is our website, because once you subscribe there, we do invite you into a private Facebook area where we meet on there twice a week as well. And we talk again, and we have products again. And my people really love my people. The people that come to Live True really love watching us unbox and do life and all of that stuff. And I would just say Live True is more about the community even. And then it is built with products, but the community is the space that keeps it alive. So you can join us in our Facebook community, our Live True community, and also at lovelivetrue.com.
Excellent. I'll happily link all of those in the show notes of this of the Krista Layne Sevajian episode here. Krista, it's always a delight to get to chat with you. Often I have to share you with my wife, but it's been nice getting to chat one-on-one. I did not expressly ask every question that I had prompted you with prior, but you touched on a lot of it. Is there anything else that we didn't bring up that you'd like to talk about?
I think one of the things that happens in my community now is people love the story of crossing over to the other side in a couple of ways. Like, they love how it went dark and we went light and created a business. They love how I show vulnerability and that I'm not perfect and I'm still learning and still awakening. This job transfer to leave my job and go into my full-time entrepreneurship and to run my business was another awakening. It was harder than I thought. I never stop working. So I have to work on schedules and like really be intentional about my time and how much I'm devoting to my business. And the other side of it was I was letting go of a lot of who I knew I was. And so a lot of our followers now, like we just did a big pack for another influencer who is opening up an entrepreneurship business of teaching these artists how to be full-time entrepreneurs. But what I'd tell anybody doing that is expect more growth. Yes, it seems like more people are coming to the community of Live True and talking about how they want to do it too. So they watch my stories and they go, how can I do that? And they'll talk about it, but also be ready for a shell shock and an awakening, because to do this differently than you've always done it, it's another whole portal you're about to walk through. So that's something I would just offer your viewers and your listeners, because people who want to leave their full-time jobs tend to find me. And the other side of it too is it is romantic. It is a beautiful dance, but it's also, there's some heartache in it too. And it grows you up as well. So that would be my last add-in.
That's awesome. Krista, thank you for taking the time and being very open, vulnerable, and sharing your story and sharing your thoughts with me and with the listeners. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Joe. Thanks for having me on here. It's such an honor to be a part of this.
Well, thank you. True pleasure for me as well, Krista. I will be speaking with you very soon, I'm sure.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.